life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome to Adventures, Dylan here. And on today's podcast, I have Troy Haines. He is an entrepreneur, an investor, a biohacker, a consciousness hacker, and the chair of Transformative Technologies Australia. And without any further delay, I'd like to bring in Troy Haines. Hey, welcome.
Hey, brother. How you doing? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate making the time, and I'm really excited to chat with you about all things transformative technology, specifically consciousness hacking. I think it's a very cool subject, and also there's probably some mystery behind that on what that is. So I would love to just first jump into and say, what brought you into the whole transformative spaces? What was the journey that you had leaving whatever community you're a part of to really get involved into this transformative tech?
Yeah, man, cool. So for me, I guess if I look way back, it was like my own personal suffering, and I guess that's the case for a lot of us. That brings us to, the path that we're on, and it's like looking for solutions. Like I figured there had to be a better way to live. Like life just wasn't making sense to me. I found myself overwhelmed, stressed, anxious a lot of the time, and so for me, it was that, like, really looking for ways that I could find that could help me move beyond my own personal suffering. And like getting on that personal development path, it was meditation as a core day-to-day activity, which really helped me to gain space from that mind-made concept of self, that ongoing story that we have playing in our head, that self that just doesn't shut up. In meditation, I found I had I started to get some space from that. And it was from the stillness, sitting in that stillness, that I found myself inspired by ideas and so forth. And that led me on a path to into entrepreneurship, because I had ideas and wanting to then like figure out how to commercialize those. And then along that path, I got introduced to transformative technology. Once you're in that entrepreneurial path, like I had actually started a startup incubator, co-working space, which I hosted for 8 years. And then, it was led into transformative technologies. And from there, it's kind of led me to what I'm doing today, utilizing technology, meditation, a whole host of different practices to help optimize and understand ourselves.
That's great. That's beautiful. Yeah, it is so interesting. So much for entrepreneurs. There's a pain that you're trying to scratch, some sort of itch of your own understanding that then as you go, you're trying to solve it for yourself. So then you just reflectively solve it for other people, because you get so much time looking inwards that other people go, how do I, much like a guide on the path. You're like, I'm not at the top of the mountain, but I'm like halfway up and you're at the bottom. So let me help you get up to this point. Did you notice any of the mindfulness and meditations and things you're doing? Because I think the incubation part you're working with is called the space. I think was the name of it. Is that right? Yeah. Did that serve you in that position, being a part of this space as entrepreneurship? There's a whole bunch of like, we'll just say internal suffering that goes around young entrepreneurs trying to get into the space, and so your space, the space. And so is that were you able to leverage it there and find the gifts that you could actually repurpose your insights there? Or how did you navigate from the space into the Transformative Technology Labs?
Yeah, great question. And the co-working space incubator was called The Space, and not like the space that you go to, but what I found is like the more I was able to sit and hold my attention away from the self, the internal noise, the thoughts, feelings that compelled us into action, the more I was able to hold my attention in that stillness, the more I had inspired ideas. I had creative thoughts, and that's why it was called The Space, because it was the space between the authentic self and that mind-made concept of self. And it's from there that I had all these inspired ideas. And It was like, well, it's one thing to have the idea, but then how do you effectively commercialize it? And so that's where we started building a community. And, we had a saying, it takes a village to raise a startup. So, well, look, how do we more effectively commercialize these ideas, and where's the support structure to do that? And so we started building out that, like an ecosystem to help support that. But you're absolutely right. It's like meditation then became a daily part of my journey. And in terms of problem solving, and we can't think our way to the solution when you're in that like ongoing thought stream of just like the mind loops that we get caught in. I'm sure you've experienced it, where you're just going around in circles, or you're sitting in front of your computer trying to get stuff done, and your brain stops working because you're in a high beta state. It's not where creativity, innovation, problem solving happens. And so I really started learning around like what was actually happening inside our head in terms of relevant brainwave states, and how to access those at will for creativity, for a greater sense of connection to ourselves, and instinct, intuition. Like what I learned is like these different brainwave states all have their different roles to play, and a lot of people get caught in this high beta brainwave frequency. So learning around these brainwave states, practicing meditation daily, being in the entrepreneurial space, sort of it became. It was about 6 years into my journey with the incubator that I got introduced to Transformative Technologies. It's a movement out of San Francisco. And they were looking for someone to help support bringing together or identifying the key stakeholders within the ecosystem in Australia and plugging them into their international ecosystem. And so that's how I sort of got involved. And for me, they had a very similar vision to me. Like, what inspires my life is to help elevate human consciousness. And that's essentially what they're working towards as well, is like using technology. How do we apply technologies in a way that helps us to flourish as a species? Because technology, for all the good that it does, not all technology actually supports our health and our well-being. So how do we apply technology to the human so that we can evolve in such a way that accelerate our evolution?
Absolutely. Yeah. They often say that technology is a race between utopia and disaster, right? And if you can elevate them in the right direction, then you're on the path. One of the challenges that I've seen with people in the conscious space is being comfortable monetizing and going into the space. And one of the things for young founders and people that are in the space, they're very good at doing enlightened activities or meditating or things like that. But when it comes to actually monetizing those things, there's usually a lot of negative stories or programmings or difficulties. They would maybe rather shift into the area of meditation than they would go into those more challenging areas of actually monetizing those types of gifts. Maybe they feel like there's some sort of shame or guilt around it, or some other activity where I can't monetize my gifts. Can you talk to me a little about bridging the gap between bringing in consciousness awareness and monetizing these types of transformative technologies?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up. And there's a couple of things that I'll share on that. One is like just the concept of for profit, for purpose, capitalism, it's like any sort of technology, any sort of tool. You can use it it's like a knife, right? A knife, you can use it to make a beautiful dinner, and you can also use it to harm somebody. Capitalism is the same. You can use it in such a way that it helps support people to grow and evolve, or you can use it to suppress and manipulate people. And so it needs more people that are on the spectrum towards high levels of consciousness to be using these technologies in such a way that it helps humanity to evolve. So let's create things that actually really matter, and from the profits that you make from that, well, then you can apply them in such a way that helps more people, as opposed to others that are reaping the rewards of the capitalist system in such a way that it's profiting them, but they're not necessarily giving back. So I encourage those people that, sort of are at that point of wanting to do good and build something, but are caught on the fringe of like almost like being stuck because they don't want to play in that system. But the reality that I see is, I see people, they try to innovate everything, and just to create an amazing product that helps to support humanity is fantastic. We don't necessarily need to change the whole system to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if you are one of these people that, you're caught between, like wanting to create something really cool, but then feeling that the system is a little bit broken, well, then it needs people like us to actually use the system that's there in a meaningful way, so that we can, reapply the resources in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it's a great reframing of the narrative around that, to say that the more money you make, the more impact you can have. There's just, from what I've seen it, yeah, just some of the things I've seen around that is that, it's a Give and Take by Adam Grant, talks about there's, the richest people are givers and the poorest people are givers. The problem is that the certain people don't know how to fill up their own cup sometimes, and then they'll run dry, and then they'll run out,
Yeah.
and then they'll fall off the edge. So number one things I've seen with people that are in the consciousness space like this is that they'll give and give and give, and they don't know how to receive. They don't know actually how to monetize it. They'll run out of that, and then they'll fall off into something that they drop down from Maslow's hierarchy down to the base needs, and then they do whatever they need to survive, because you can't self-actualize when you can't feed yourself. And so that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen in the space, is around that, is how do you, especially with having an incubator, that is one of the hardest things to do, because it's not even with our own selves. We are both the dungeon master and the player in the game of life, and we are moving through it as ourselves, but trying to get groups of other people to do it. Now you've got to get through not only your own setbacks, but you have to get that through other people and get them to take those brave step forwards, which is a gigantic challenge. And so I think it's a good reframe. You're right. Technology can be used in multiple ways, but when they come to that spot, are there questions or mindsets or thought processes that they could kind of reframe and get into, or a meditative practice, or a way to be able to say, okay, I don't feel like this is valuable. Maybe it's really valuable. Everybody asks them to lead them through a meditation or lead them through something, whatever that might be, but they feel like they can't monetize it. Do you have a hack, a trick, a tip, a framework to get people to actually take that brave step forward, to try to inspire these people that are aware or conscious to be able to monetize?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind. So for profit for purpose is a good statement just to have on repeat in your head, like it's okay to make money and you can apply it in a meaningful way. The other thing is like get involved in a community. Like it's hard to do these things by yourself. So get involved in an entrepreneurial community or like-minded community. There's a growing number of like conscious kind of incubators / co-working space. Like I feel like to some extent there's a growing trend towards doing good in the entrepreneurial space. So get involved in a community, but I feel like some people hide behind it too, Dylan. Like there comes a point where you actually need to figure out if the market actually wants what you're selling. And just because you think it's a good idea doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually the market wants it. And I see this a lot in the entrepreneurial space. People fall in love with their idea and they'll apply their resources and they'll start. It's actually really fun and to be creative and work on your website and work on your logo and develop your product. But when you're doing that in isolation, I see a lot of people do this. They sort of hide behind that, because this is probably the bigger challenge that people have is like actually putting their idea out there in the marketplace and having people give them feedback. That's the thing that people tend to hide behind, because that's where it gets real. Because you find out like what's right, what's wrong with it. And then, that's ultimately what we want to be doing, is get to market quickly with your concept, minimal viable product. And something that we've developed as part of the work that we're doing is minimal viable data as well. And it's matching the market validation with the product validation so that you know, A, does your product actually do what you say it's going to do? And B, is do people care? Do people want it? And if so, it's a framework we've developed to move people along. And so, like, it's getting to market quickly to find out, like, because that's where you learn how to position it, what people want, what's right with it, what's wrong with it. And ultimately, you'll get so much of it wrong, but that's where you get the feedback and you can iterate on it. And so I guess I just want to give people a little bit of a, like, hey, this is where it gets real. Like, you actually need to step up into this and put your idea out there. And it's not about having the right idea. It's just about having the courage to take on the feedback so that you can iterate. It's like evolution. Like it's spitting out all these different options, and not all of them take form and continue on. And that's what ideas are like as well. It's about finding the one that's actually going to work for you. Sorry, I just had
powerful. No, that's great. No, 100%. Now I wanted you to finish off that thought, but you're 100% right when it comes to, so many people like the concept of playing entrepreneur. So many people like the idea of like the sexy sizzle of to say the thing or have the identity around the thing. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So that whole ego death that they experience by putting their baby out there, they have this identity attached to their product. And if they put that product there, then therefore they're not an entrepreneur. So they're constantly wanting to be perfect because they don't want people to crap all over their idea, AKA crap all over their identity. And so that's the thing. You're totally minimal viable data. I've never heard of that. You're totally right. But say, how do you take that brave step to get that feedback to be able to evolve? Because you need that resistance. You need to come up against that force to be able to kind of, sharpen your blade against the stone of truth. So that all makes a ton of sense. And I appreciate you sharing that feedback. What about the technologies, these different transformative technologies? Because there's a whole bunch out there. There's AI, there's biofeedback, there's VR, there's big data. There is a plethora of these transformative technologies that are out there. What ones excite you the most? What ones do you personally light you up to think about, either out right now or the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. Like, I guess there's the ones that I use day to day now, which I think are really cool, and we use them as part of the programs we've developed. And that's really like the neurofeedback, biofeedback. So it is a lot of the wearable technology, because that basically helps us day to day to gather objective data that can help us to know ourselves better, like, and not just know ourselves, but then take effective action to fix what's not working effectively. And ideally, you need expert intervention or support to understand the data and apply it in a meaningful way. But these sort of technologies are available. You go back 10 years and no one had a personal EEG device to be able to understand what's happening within their brain and how their brain might be different to other people's brains. And the same thing with a whole host of different biometrics, from HRV to heart rate and so forth, but that we can track day to day. Sleep is another one. And so a lot of these technologies are about helping to know ourselves individually. But I really love where the VR space is going, to be quite honest, because like when you look at VR, AR, XR, where that's at today, it's kind of like where the mobile phone industry were, back 20 years ago in terms of the technology. It's big, it's clunky, it's getting better. And the way I see it is like, when you look at, virtual reality, pretty soon the line between the virtual and the real is going to become blurred, because the brain can't actually tell the difference. And if you've had an experience in VR, you'll be able to attest to this. The body and the brain goes through the whole motions, through the processes of actually feeling like it's actually in that environment. And so as the technology gets better, like, our ability to be able to, experience worlds which are potentially not real is really exciting. And then when you throw on top of that, artificial intelligence or super intelligence, like the line between artificial and real is likely to become blurred. And then when you've got like a growing trend towards meditation and a whole range of different tools, including stimulation devices, helping to put us into, to shift our state into a more conducive, alpha, theta, and even a delta brain frequency, it's enabling more and more people to disidentify with that mind-made concept of self. So ultimately, the consciousness itself, or what it means to be human, human experience moving forward, is really going to shift and expand, and in ways that we probably can't even imagine now. And it's these exponential technologies which are helping to enable that.
Yeah, you touched on a bunch of great points there. I'm gonna break these off just a little bit of time. So one, my whole area is virtual reality, and that's my jam. I run a dev studio. I've done it for a number of years, and I do a lot of things and transformative work with VR tech. So I completely agree with you. And there's a lot of powerful things you can do with that. The neurofeedback. I do want first, before I go into these other areas, touch just so people have a clarity of what you do. You're with I Am Connected. Could you please explain a little bit of your company, what that does, and what do you mean when you're talking about neurofeedback technology and expert intervention?
Yeah, so there's a whole a growing number of neurofeedback devices. So it's technology that measures brain frequency. So it helps to understand and measure the state. And like typically we move through, 5 predominant brainwave states throughout the course of a normal day, from being wide awake to being sound asleep. And the waking state, which is a high beta state, is the state we're in when we multitask. But the thing is, when we multitask and in today's modern environment, there's so many things pulling on our attention that our attention gets fractionated. We end up in this high beta state where we lose our effectiveness because our attention's all over the place. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. You get into the office or into work and our attention's being pulled all over the place, whether it's, internally from, distraction and interruption, wanting to, check your social media or check your emails, or externally being distracted by, colleagues, workmates, and so forth. So that it puts us into a high beta state. So what we do is we teach people around this, essentially, and we're able to track from being wide awake to being sound asleep our brainwave states through wearable technology. So track the sleep state, and because we move through the same states as a sort of an apex in high beta, and we move down into through alpha, through theta, through delta, as we go into a deep sleep, rest and recovery. And then as we come out of sleep, we go up into beta again, but teaching people how to regulate their state, again, using neurofeedback device, teaching meditation. And so this neurofeedback basically enables us to help train and teach people, what does it feel like to be, stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed, and then give them an intervention, a practice to be able to consciously bring their attention down out of that into more of a flow like state, into an alpha and even a theta, and in that we have a greater sense of connection to ourself, that separate mind-made sense of self, the noise, the thoughts, feelings, those mind loops, they tend to become more background or disengaged. So we're able to just dwell in that stillness. It's almost like to be at rest, and it's in those states where we get inspired thoughts. So it's using neurofeedback to help understand where the person's at, and that can be a variety of different sounds, from like pouring rain when you're in a busy beta state, into birds chirping when you're in a relaxed, calm state. So it's that association.
Beautiful. So you're able to help people gain awareness by using technology, the mental states that they're in, and you bring them into a more useful, productive, compassionate state, which then allows for the expansion of consciousness, which allows you to be able to kind of tap into the universe, lack of a better term, and be able to pull source the information that's needed versus that myopic monkey mind focus that really restricts the options. And so if you can help people by using technology to become aware, you can then say, okay, you can become aware. These are what the different states feel like. These are the states that you can go into. And then you can say, okay, if you want to solve this problem, this is the X, Y, Z. This is the different route to get up to this side of the mountain. And this is how you get there by using these technologies. And so you help shortcut the awareness, because otherwise they could be meditating or they could be doing those other things and they don't fully understand what state they're in. They don't understand. They have feelings and sensations, but without a guide to say, okay, this is where you're at, this is what you're doing. It's more of a wandering path without an actual direct route. Is that somewhat close? I try to.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate reflection, because ultimately, like, and you're talking about people that are actually meditating. A lot of people aren't even meditating, so they're existing in this monkey mind throughout the day, and that often brings in that monkey mind dysfunction into their sleep. So they're not sleeping well. Then they're not sleeping well, so they're tired. So then they bring that into their waking state, and there's dysfunction there, and it becomes this really negative loop. And so we can intervene in that, firstly, by just measuring, hey, this is actually what's happening for you in sleep. And this is what your brain looks like throughout the course of a normal day, and just teaching them around the brain waves. And so then we can start providing, interventions to help make their sleep effective, which then makes them more effective the next day. But then, hey, inevitably your attention is going to get pulled all over the place. This is a range of different interventions to teach you how to move out of that high beta monkey mind state and into more of a flow alpha, more of a flow theta. And there's things that you can do in an external environment to help support like your state as well. So there's an inner game component, and then there's an outer game component that we call. Yeah. And that it might be, though, that with these technologies, the technologies that we use, that it shows that there's actually a deeper level of dysfunction that's occurred because they've been, on this rabbit wheel, this hamster wheel, for way too long, and they've started to cause biological damage to their body or their hormone system. And so that's when we need to then move into like biotesting, like biohacking, looking at ways that we can support the body's natural recovery, whether it's gut health, whether it's hormone health.
Yeah, the physiology affects psychology, and it's a two-way street. I smile because I'm happy. I'm happy because I smile, but it's not one directional. You get feelings and you apply stories. You have stories, you apply feelings. So that makes a ton of sense. Have you tried working with virtual reality for this type of stuff? Have you tried hooking up VR and biofeedback? Have you tried just VR by themselves and inducing them in flow states with that type of stuff? Do you have any experience with that, or are you?
There's some really cool VR applications like that are coming out. Trip is one, TRIPP. They have daily meditations, which is in a very immersive, three-dimensional world where it's guided meditations. So more and more applications we're seeing in the virtual space. We have hooked up EEG devices just to playing around to see what's happening. Don't necessarily need the VR for that at this stage, but it's all very interesting. Like we can verify that what's actually happening in the VR experience using the neurofeedback technology. So it's like, this is actually really cool. You don't need the neurofeedback device ongoing for that, but there's definitely ways that we can look at integrating those moving forward. So there's a whole range of different, as someone with a VR studio, I'm sure we can agree that like where this is going is really exciting. The application of technologies.
We're on a roadmap. It's VR isn't the pinnacle. It is one step along the path to the journey of where you want to go, the fully integrated self, right? So it's your AI, biofeedback, VR, all this stuff's coming together. Is incredibly cool. I'll tell you about one experience I mentioned on the last podcast, but I'll tell you because I don't know if you ever heard about her, Mary Lou Jepson. I don't know if you ever heard that name before. There's this. I'll tell you what I'll tell you who she is. Not even a 60-second story. Blew my mind, freaked me out, gave me chills, and I sent it to a bunch of my smart friends that can you verify, and they said, yeah, this is true. So at 3 a.m. I was on a subreddit, and there's a subreddit thread that says girl invents ex head of research for Oculus creates AR VR telepathy. I go, oh, interesting. So I watched the video. Name's Mary Lou Jepson. She left Oculus to open up her own company. I think it's called Open Water, Blue Water, something like that. But at the Oculus Labs, she took the VR headset that was like a toggleable augmented reality VR camera thing. But inside the headset, she put an array of camera lenses. And the array of camera lenses, if you put a camera lens up to your finger, you can see the blood flow. And so she put them all inside the headset, and which basically operated at a functional MRI machine inside a VR headset so that you could actually see the brain functions inside that. So what happens when you put someone inside these different states and you do it for an hour, you do it for a week, you do it for a year? What happens when you have thousands of people all doing that and you're using big data to look at that, to the point to where I could feel a thought and go, oh, Troy's a super awesome dude, and just think it could turn it into text, send it over to you, and it could translate that to you and actually translate that into audio, and that would be AR, VR. And she said that you could even at some point write on top of it, but she's like, we'd never do that. She got a little squirrely at that point of the video, but it was very interesting stuff. And she left and she went off to go do her own thing. She's one of the girls that invented holograms, like back in the day, and she was doing speed of light calculations with her hands. I'm like, oh, this chick's too smart, and I'm not smart enough to know if this is true or not. So I sent it off, and my friends were like, yeah, that's 100% true. So it's not like out yet, but I heard it's a functioning system and something to kind of look into the horizon as, things to look for.
Dude, and this is why, why consciousness, consciousness is the big domino. I feel like if we can help elevate human consciousness, and we now we need to more than ever, because the technology is getting so advanced that it can be used to manipulate and enslave and control people. And so we need to make sure that we're applying it in such a way, and the people that are on the other end of those technologies are doing it in such a way that it helps to elevate humanity as opposed to enslave them. And that's like, I love hearing that story, but there is a dark side, like we talked about before. like a knife is a technology, and it can be good and it can be bad. And it's ultimately very exciting. I'm also supporting or involved in Tech for Dreaming, which is a movement. Brian Gillen, he's one of the senior product developers at Aura, product managers at Aura, and it's
Aura, are you talking about Aura Ring? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yep. Aura
Cool. Ring. I have a question about that, but please continue.
Yeah. So that's about, like, the ultimate goal there is lucid dreaming on demand. Like we talked about before in terms of I Am Connected, helping to measure people's sleep state and make that effective. But that's just like the beginning, right? Like ultimately we should be happy and healthy. And that's like level one, managing our day-to-day state so that we're in a state of well-being, managing our sleep so it's effective. But then beyond that, it's like we can start exploring the dream realm in a way that's not been possible before. And lucid dreaming has been scientifically validated to be a real phenomenon. And so to be conscious within our dreams and to consciously explore the dream realm is a reality. And it's like, how do we apply technology to make that more accessible to more people? And I feel like the only reason it's not at the moment is because most people are still just lost in the monkey mind. And as we help people step out of that noise, then it's like, well, then this is like a new frontier that starts to open up to us. It's like expanding the human experience beyond just like waking up, going to sleep, going to work, waking up, going to sleep.
The people think we're thinking machines that feel, but we're really feeling machines that adapted thinking to get connection, and really social collaboration. With the Aura, I had a very unique experience. I don't know if you'll be able to answer, or Brian will, or any of these things, but I'm going to throw this out there. We might go in a bit of a woo-woo territory for a second, so bear with me for a half a beat.
Cool.
Back in 2017, I got to go on one of my dream trips where I got to spend 2 weeks in the Peruvian jungle with me and my 2 co-founders, imbibing in plant medicine for several sessions. And when we went to go do that, I actually went through, and I was doing a journaling. We're actually going through this kind of personal development course at the same time. But while on plant medicine, I actually had the Aura ring on. And so I did 5.5 hours of REM sleep. It was the weirdest thing when I looked at my data feedback, where normally, you have that REM sleep peak for a bit and it drops down. It went up and straight across for hours. And I felt like I connected to the universe and cosmos. I felt like I was in a slipstream tunnel, and I was diving into the cosmos. And I totally don't understand it, but it was a very unique experience, and the data was crazy on the device. But again, I'm not an expert in the area. I thought it was fascinating. I had the ring. It was the old big bulky one, but I don't really understand what that data meant. But it's very so I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. But you're talking about lucid dreaming. You're talking about the Aura ring. You're talking about this. I felt like I would just bolt on my own personal experience and say, do you have any thoughts about that, or what that could mean, or what your takeaway from that might be?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts, only because we've done a lot of the similar sort of things, even with EEG devices on, and the Aura. 5 hours of REM, like REM typically would, it's basically when you're in REM sleep, essentially our body's in a state of paralysis. So you must have been like effectively really still for a long period of time. The data is interesting. Like I've seen it on my own data. Typically for me, it's really the deep sleep that gets activated, because when you look at the brainwave states, delta is the deep dreamless sleep that we go into on the sleep side. On the waking side, though, as well, you can still access delta, but it's really deep, profound meditation. It's prayer. Like when you really experience at prayer, you can access these deeper delta brain frequencies. On the other side of delta is like 0.1 to 3 hertz. So there's not much. There's high amplitude. They're really slow waves. Propensity that's happening in the brain. On the other side of that is there's no brain frequency. So ultimately, it's like death. And people that have had near-death experiences, when they cross over, they have these mystical experiences. They cross over. My experience with like psychedelic journeys is that there's that same crossing over, that threshold into the other side. And when you look at the EEG data, there's a high propensity of delta, which on an Aura shows up as deep sleep, because it's a similar sort of thing on the sleep cycle. So why it showed up as REM, like 5 hours of REM, I'm unsure, man. But that's all very interesting. At this stage, it's such an early thing. That's what I love about this tech, is it's like it's data gathering and sharing, it's learning and exploring. And it's like, for me, that's what consciousness hacking is. We're exploring consciousness and what it means to be human, or not just even just human, but to be conscious. It's wild.
It is wild. It is that we are aware of us being inside the game that is life, which is a really weird, trippy thing. And I have no clue what it meant, but tying those pieces together, I had to ask. Let's just touch on the consciousness hacking. Can you please talk to me a little bit about what is the definition of conscious hacking to you, and how is it currently applied, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, it's actually a term that I've borrowed from the work that Mikey Siegel has done. It's actually a movement out of San Francisco. He was Mikey Siegel is the founder. He was one of the original founders of Transformative Technology as well. And essentially, whether he uses it in the same way as I do, but typically for me, it's like most of us get caught up in that the separate self, the mind-made concept of self, which keeps us separate from ultimately who and what we are. And as you go down the rabbit hole with meditation, personal development, plant medicines, you start to see that I'm not that ongoing stream of thoughts and feelings in my head. And it's like, well, what are all the different ways that we can, explore and know ourselves as the individual self, but then as we spend more and more time in the stillness, we come to appreciate that we're more than just that mind-made concept of self, and we're actually, we're part of a whole. We're one consciousness. And so for me, consciousness hacking is the disidentification with that mind-made concept of self and all the ways that can happen, and technology can help support that. Meditation, a lot of the ancient practices, prayer, there's yoga, qigong, lots of different practices that can help with that. But then also, psychedelics, there's a psychedelic renaissance that's happening at the moment. And, they can all, how we're looking to apply them is integrating them all, like doing plant medicine without any effective integration, it's kind of its own form of escapism and abuse, I think, to some extent. It's really, what we learn is that you can, through a journey, experience yourself as the unified self, as the whole, and essentially experience what we're ultimately part of without any sense of doubt. It's just like beyond the mind and beyond words. But then here we come back to this separate self. And so what I realize is it's really about having these experiences, but it still comes back to, coming back to optimize this individual sense of self in such a way that knowing what we're part of, and potentially, well, in my mind, what we're evolving to, which is that unified self. And how do we apply technology? How do we, apply meditation? How do we utilize plant medicines in such a way that as a collective, we go, wow, this is where we're evolving to. Like, how do we explore, know ourselves? Like, what are all the things that we can do around that? And for me, that's what I guess consciousness hacking is. It's like, it's really just knowing ourselves, the separate self and the unified self, and bringing those two together.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful explanation. It's de-identifying with the individual self, and recognizing that not only we, an individual completely autonomous, but we are also part of the collected whole, and ultimately we are this united entity. Ultimately, do you feel that consciousness originates from within or from without? Are we an antenna beaming down consciousness and connection, or do you feel that we are solely, everything that we get is from within our brains, and then it's not outwards? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a neuroscientist, obviously, but my personal experience with this is that, our consciousness permeates everything. It's where it's ultimately within, it's without. It's like, it's a very good question. Like, does the brain, give us consciousness? Or I don't align essentially with that. That doesn't feel real for me. Knowing that I'm part of a whole feels real to me only from the experiences that I have, and even just simply by sitting in meditation. And so I think that it's, my awareness is that it's, consciousness permeates everything, and we are an expression of it, and it's through us, I guess. It's learning. It's expressing itself, and we're just an expression of the one.
I am not a neuroscientist either. I'm just got a lot of questions, so I'm not. I was like, I wonder what he thinks about this. What is your holy grail ultimately for you? Working with I Am Connected, everything you're doing with the transformative tech and all this stuff. Ultimately, do you have a holy grail purpose with everything that you do, and in vision and in game, something that you are seeking towards? towards the end of all this effort?
Yeah, I guess it's potential. Ultimately, what is our potential? And like we talked about before, I talked about, like super intelligence. We're creating super intelligence through artificial intelligence, and that's going to blur the line. So same as virtual reality. And, some people would even attest to the fact that we are actually in a dream world now. We're actually in a simulation, just a highly advanced simulation. And there's ways that you can potentially even test that's actually real. And I've had, may not be time today to maybe offline I can chat to you about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then meditation, we're disidentifying with this mind-made concept of self. And psychedelics, there's a psychedelic renaissance or a plant medicine renaissance that's happening, and that's expanding our understanding of consciousness itself and essentially what we are. So really, I feel like the future is going to be fast, like it already is. And so it's like really evolving into our potential. And as we lift human consciousness, as we and for me, what that looks like is just teaching people how to separate from that mind-made concept of self, and then working towards healing the traumas that we all have. And it's like becoming like ultimately like what we are, what we're here for, like a tree, like an oak tree, has the seed of potential and it grows into this beautiful big oak tree. And it realizes its potential. Like so many of us as human beings don't. And it's like, imagine a world where we did, like if we individually and collectively started popping and realizing our potential and knowing that we get to have this separate experience, which is the gift, like to be in the separation, but ultimately know that we're a part of a whole as well, and just play and rejoice and work together to evolve into like what is our ultimate potential. And for me, that's where it's going. But it starts with where we're at is like most people are suffering because they're over-identified with the mind-made concept of self.
That's awesome. So then your holy grail is to help humanity evolve into their ultimate potential?
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And it may not even be human. It's
cyborgy AI.
Well, it's consciousness itself. If everything's consciousness, we're consciousness, right? That's probably like the futuristic thinking. Like, there's a great book by Max Tegmark called Life 3.0. That's worth checking out.
Oh, I don't think I haven't seen that one yet. Oh, that sounds great. I'll check that for sure. What is, so if that's your holy grail, what is the dragon you must slay in order to get there? What is the beast that you maybe fear that you can't overcome in order for that to happen? What is that dragon? Is there some
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I feel like it's what comes up for me is like, I guess, is cognitive bias. Like the world that because I don't watch news and I don't tend to buy into any of the trauma or like the fake news or any of the stuff that's peddled online. So I can sort of bring myself into a utopian world where I think this is ultimately going to happen.
Yeah.
But then there's the awareness that not everybody's ready for it, and there's probably other people out there that are pushing a different agenda, where the utopian world may look like to them enslaving humanity. And I guess that's the dragon. Like, we live this as part of being in this separate experience. It's a world of duality. There's there is the light and the dark, the good and the bad, and like the journey that ultimately I feel like I'm on is the layer up from that, and bringing humanity into that is to realize that the light and the dark, the good and the bad, they're all part of the one whole. And it's not about pushing against the other. It's all one. So not sure I've effectively answered your question. It's just day to day and day by day, just doing the next step.
It was a very honest and true answer. I saw you reflect in, and again, what's coming up for me. You don't have a none of these questions are pre-scripted. None of these things are it's just what comes up into the moment. And you're right. The cognitive bias, the frames, the narrative stories that people tell themselves about technology being evil or not embracing that, or wanting that it's people not wanting to have their own ego deaths to evolve into what they can become, is people refuse to let go of that. And I think you're 100% right. Is there's the challenge of, in order to evolve humanity, it has to be willing, and you can't force it. If you force it, you're a villain, right? If you inspire it, you're a hero. And so the challenge is not everybody is willing to take that brave step into the scary unknown. So I appreciate you being honest and truthful with that. That resonates with me. I know you have a hard stop, although I'd love to continue talking to you. So as we come towards the end of this, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you and more about what you do?
Yeah, I guess that if, like, suffering is not, ultimately pain can push us where we need to go. And, we can get caught in the day-to-day suffering of thinking that we need to be somewhere different than where we're at. When really, like, that can be the gift, like, that can be the thing that's pushing you where you need to go. And so I guess just honoring wherever you're at, but never lose hope, because the pain is trying to get you where you need to go. Yeah, I know it did for me, and I know it has for so many others. And because like, the space outside the mind, or outside the mind-made concept of self, is a place where you can actually see this separate experience is the gift, because ultimately we are whole. We are part of a something that's bigger than our individual self. And so it makes this separate experience the gift.
It's beautiful. Yeah, the pain is helping you where you need to go. I love it. And Troy, if people want to find out more about you, get a hold of you, find out more about your company, where would they go to do that?
Best place is probably just iamconnected.com, just our website. You can reach out through there.
iamconnected.com. Beautiful. Awesome. Troy, this has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I very much enjoyed it. Have a beautiful and blessed day, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your opportunity to chat. It's been awesome.
Yeah, me too. Take care now, brother. See ya. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for